Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 34th U.S. President. 2 miles after the first cash drop, I was dying. People were scratching their heads, wondering why I crawled along the sidewalk like Igor from Young Frankenstein. Or is it Frankenstein? I had so much weight in my backpack, I thought, how will I ever get to Maine, much less get out of town? It was apparent that I needed to shed some weight, and it would have to be more than the handle of my toothbrush. This is the Long Journey Podcast with Jason Jamar, detailing my travels across America as I share thrilling stories from my 16-month backpacking adventure from California to Maine, and my 8-month kayak voyage from Maine to Texas. "438 days, 7 hours, 26 minutes, 14 seconds, until a wake-up." The date was June 6, 1998, 1,633 hours and 46 seconds, or 4:33 p.m. And the result of 438 days, 7 hours, 26 minutes, and 14 seconds resulted from the EAS, or End of Active Service, calculator. I had just entered my EAS date, September 10th, 1999. A wake-up, an idiom referring to the glorious day a Marine who had determined they were not a lifer or career Marine, transitioned back to 1st Civ Div. That's 1st Civilian Division, jargon for being a civilian. I was a Data Communications Marine with the Marine Wing Communications Squadron 38 within the 3rd Marine Air Wing. This meant I knew that you could color with crayons, in addition to eating them. Someone must have been or was about to get out of the Marine Corps. This moment generally led to speculation among the rest of us about what one would do after completing their obligation to Uncle Sam, and trying to figure out how much time they still had left. Like Clarence getting his wings in It's a Wonderful Life, every time a bell rings, a Marine gets their wake-up. This ritual was akin to fishing stories. Instead of regaling everyone with the one that got away, it was dreams and plans about what one would do with their lives post-Marine Corps. We all delighted in hearing their plans, and secretly envied the Marine waking up. Do I go home, get an IT job, and do what I do now but make a lot more? Or go to school? Or what if I did something completely different? Maybe an adventure. I was looking for an adventure. I have always had an adventurous streak that the Corps didn't quite satiate. It probably intensified my appetite. I wanted to test my mettle, to see if I had what it takes. I wanted to travel at leisure and see the nation that I had served. I found that those who are the guarantors of liberty usually don't have a great deal themselves, and I wanted the freedom to go for a very long adventure on my terms. A couple of buddies and I were all to get out within 6 weeks of one another, and we had started dreaming up this idea to sort of hobo hike across the country. They were both from the Northeast and I was from Central Texas, so while this sounded cool, I really didn't see a reason to go past Texas. But the more I pondered it and kind of turned the idea around in my head, the idea grew, and then my goal morphed into New York State. Eventually, I thought if I go that far, I should go on up to Maine. Then I would have gone corner to corner. I would have bragging rights. This was an adventure that I could get behind. It reminded me of reading Peter Jenkins' book, A Walk Across America, when I was in the 8th grade. I believe this experience would be an education unlike any other. I would experience and see the country in a way I would never get from a book. I was young and single with no attachments. Why wait until I'm retired to travel and see the world? why not now? I secretly hope this adventure might have the added benefit of making me a better man for my future wife. I wanted a tale that I could tell my grandkids about someday, and this adventure was it. More importantly, I had become a Christian during my senior year in high school. I found that for me personally, I related best to God while in nature. I hope to find a deeper understanding of Him in the hard places, a monastic bent to my travels. Perhaps the best you can do is strive with your faith. As a freshman in high school, I played trumpet in the band. Our section leader, Eric Abercrombie, took me under his wing as a mentor. He started calling me Percy, which I didn't find flattering at all. I asked him why, and he told me to read the book Scarlet Pimpernel. The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Emuska Orsi. Sir Percy Blakeney is soon introduced as a buffoon. I thought, why would I think it cool to be nicknamed after him? My friend must be having a laugh at my expense. But further into the story, this is just a ruse for who Percy really is. The Scarlet Pimpernel was an 18th century proto-Batman who had a secret identity and relied on quick wit and disguises to save the day, as he rescued those to be executed during the French Revolution. In the book, the characters travel between Dover, England, and Calais, France. As I was surveying the map of Maine, near the easternmost corner, I found Calais. Perfect. I will finish my daring exploits in Calais, Maine. Only I would find out many miles and months later that down east Mainers don't pronounce it Calais. They pronounce it callus. Like I've been chopping firewood all day and now I have a callus on my hand. I would travel corner to corner from San Diego, California to Calais, Maine. I'm going to backpack across the nation. Whoa. You know, you just don't wake up one day and kind of yawn and say, I think I'll walk across the country today. Now I had a plan. I had to take the significant goal of hiking from San Diego to Maine and break it down into much more manageable bits. So I started researching everything that I could. I read and searched for maps about the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, the North Country Trail, the Finger Lakes Trail, the Appalachian Trail, the Natchez Trace, so on and so forth. I created a reading list to prepare myself to accomplish my goal. A Walk Across America by Peter Jenkins, Undaunted Courage by Stephen E. Ambrose, and every issue that I could get my hands on of Backpacker magazine. I studied different backpacking philosophies, such as ultralight backpacking versus traditional. Hiking poles, boots, hats, breathable shirts, sleeping mats, sleeping bags, tents, hammocks, tarps, rain gear, knives, hatchets, stoves, etc. I examined lengthy debates on the merits of an external versus an internal frame pack. Iodine pills versus water filter kits, or both. I even researched alternatives to dial-up internet, like using portable ham radio to connect to the internet, which was doable, but not entirely practical back then. I began to study the weather patterns and the projected time of year I would be in each region of the country.
Right now, it's still kind of chilly out there. Temperatures staying in the high 40s. Tomorrow's forecast will be in the 60s. The beaches staying around 60.
Since I would be leaving Southern California in the fall, it only made sense to stay in the South until springtime, then start making my way north to Maine. I began working out the two biggest challenges I saw before me: budget and water. I mapped the distances between towns and the rest stops I could find on the maps. Then I drove as much of the planned route between San Diego, California and Marble Falls, Texas as I could, taking careful notes. Notes included mileage between each city, town, village, or rest stop that I would encounter along my way. I paid particular attention to anywhere that I could find water. For instance, at mile marker 380 on Highway 60 in Arizona, 3/4 of a mile north, there's a cattle trough and a windmill. Worst case scenario, water. About 6 months before my projected start date, I started preparing food. I found a local Schlotzsky's over in Lake Forest, California. Side note, I love Schlotzsky's. The bread makes it irresistible. Back then, it was just fantastic. And today, it makes me twice the man that I was. They used to give away their 1-gallon pickle and sauerkraut jars. That's right, the glass jars, not the plastic numbers. To anyone that would ask for them. I gathered as many as I could and stored my food supplies in them until it was time to pack for the trip. I had started saving MREs, short for meal ready to eat, from my deployments, and several friends also started giving me their extra meals. I purchased a food dehydrator and began making banana and apple chips. I would also marinate meat overnight and let it transform into beef jerky during the workday. Every payday, I bought granola bars and instant oatmeal and ramen noodles. Every spare moment became consumed with studying maps, preparing food, and making plans. One of my roommates, Todd Goldstein, and I split an early morning paper route that was on the base. I also took a night job at Subway, anything and everything to get out of debt, purchase equipment, and tuck away savings in preparation for the trip of a lifetime. Then, in the few fleeting moments that I wasn't on duty, throwing newspapers or making sandwiches, I slipped away to the mountains to hike. On this particular day, I was up in the hills with a couple of friends. We'd gone hiking in the foothills not too far from Marine Corps Air Station El Toro. MCAS El Toro is now closed. We were some of the last Marines there. At its closure, we were relocated to our new home at MCAS Miramar. While hiking in a dry creek bed, I found a large stick, about the diameter of a Louisville slugger. It hardly weighed anything at all. It was also nicely balanced. So I picked up the stick, picked up a rock, and I pitched the stone in the air like a baseball coach smacking balls at his infield players. I swung my bat, made contact, and split the rock in two. Interesting. Well, it wasn't the toughest of stones, I decided. So I picked up another rock, about the same size, and swung away. Into the air, 2 individual pieces of rock went flying. At that moment, I had found my walking stick. That stick became a part of my equipment that I carried the entire trip across the U.S. I even lashed it to the deck of my kayak for the return trek home. And now it's here in the office next to my desk. I even sorted through my childhood baseball card collection and decided the trip was worth parting with some of my most valuable trading cards. My Ken Griffey Jr. rookie cards for Topps, Upper Deck, Fleer, Don Russ. My Topps Cal Ripken Jr. cards. My Nolan Ryans, my Don Mattingly's, Bo Jackson, and many more. I raised about $800 in trip funds, which wasn't too shabby for $19.99. I had written to Camelback and Schlotzsky's and Westco Boots for sponsorship. Camelback's in a hog. No, not that kind of hog. Or that kind either, though that would have been really cool. The acronym HAWG means holds a lot of water and gear, in which I put 2 2.2-liter water pouches. Schlotzsky's is mostly franchisee-owned. They sent a copy of their yearly corporate report with all the addresses for every location worldwide. This proved valuable because I tried to visit every location that was near my route to get my fix. I'm telling you, the bread is that addictive. Westco Boots provided my custom-made all-leather boots, and I was very thankful. I made many plans. Many worked out great, and others I had to overcome and adapt. In my last few months in San Diego, I was a Marine by day and a sandwich artist by night. The gentleman I worked for owned 9 Subways in the San Diego area. I worked at 3 of them. Back then, you could earn free sandwiches if you filled in a little card with 8 stamps, the Sub Club program. When I was about to start my trip, he gave me a giant roll of stamps and a huge stack of cards. Over 300 feet of free sandwiches. I scheduled my last day of active duty service in the United States Marine Corps to coincide with my birthday. September 2nd, 1999. There I was with my little white Nissan pickup, its bed loaded with boxes of supplies. Each box labeled with a different city. 25 cities along a predetermined route between San Diego and Marble Falls. The de facto halfway point in the trip. The plan was to use supply drops from the West Coast to Texas and then mail drops from Marble Falls to Maine. On this night in the middle of the Southern California mountains, I drove up to a U.S. Border Patrol checkpoint. My first thought, oh great, 12:30 at night, I have 25 boxes labeled with cities across the Southwest. I must look like an amateur drug runner. I mean, this is how they do it, right? 5-gallon buckets and boxes with cities labeled on them, all crammed in the back of a tiny truck in the middle of the night. As the Border Patrol officer motioned me up to the checkpoint, I answered questions and showed my ID. I hastily explained what I was doing and that today was my last day in the Marine Corps. To my pleasant surprise, he told me to go on. And then just as I got a few yards from the checkpoint, he motioned for me to stop. Another officer came out with a dog and decided they wanted to search my vehicle. What a joke. Then I began to worry if the pounds and pounds of homemade beef jerky would make the dog act funny, causing them to want to open and search every box of supplies I carried. Then I would be on the side of the road in the middle of the night repacking all my supplies, and I didn't have any packing tape. I'm starting to get angry. I worried about driving down the road with my boxes unsealed and my supplies blowing out all over the highway. I tried to be patient and I asked what the problem was, reminding them that I had just been cleared to go. The other officer was a little bit less than cordial, to put it mildly. He ordered me out of my truck, with all the social graces of a wood chipper, with language that would make a sailor blush. Then instructed me to sit on the bench and wait. I was furious, and they could tell. In my anger, I also mentioned that if they opened my stuff, they better have some more tape, so I could reseal my boxes of supplies. More yelling from the kindly Border Patrol officer. I sat down. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, so if I could just bide my time, I would be on my way again shortly. I passed the time stewing. I stew a lot. I was finally cleared. They had the dog go through my truck and behind my seat, and only opened a few of the 5-gallon buckets. Thankfully, they left all of my taped boxes alone. The first Border Patrol officer sent me on my way, while the heavy went back inside his office without so much as a glance in my direction, pretending I wasn't there. I hoped that this experience wasn't an omen of events to come. It took me a while to calm down, but on the plus side, the fuming helped me stay awake for the many miles left ahead. Eventually, I decided this wasn't an omen. I had been worried over something that never happened. How much of our lives are wasted with worries that never come to pass? One of the more random and least planned parts of my preparation was that as I drove the route back to Texas, I would stop at churches, police stations, and places of business and just introduce myself and explain what I was about to undertake. I would then ask if I could leave a box of supplies with them. I even staged my winter gear with a local police department in Prescott, Arizona. I got the contact information for each place that allowed me to leave a box of supplies with them so that I could put an itinerary together for my father. Once the trip was underway, if he hadn't heard from me in a while, he could at least check in with whoever might be next on the list, corresponding to where I had last checked in. I buried enough water for 2 people in all the places where I thought I would definitely need water and wouldn't be able to get it otherwise. I had a little green notebook, the Green Military Memorandum Book, a small 3¼ inch by 5½ inch notebook, with all of my most important trip details, locations, and points of contact for all of my food, water, and supply caches. My notes also contain the local dial-up numbers for Prodigy Internet for each city across the country along my path, so I could log in with my laptop. I had to carry my laptop and digital camera in a weatherproof case. Now, I can do all of it with a smartphone. My childhood friend Aaron Haley, whose dad, Robert, paid for my internet while I traveled as a way to sponsor the trip. He felt that it was very important to document as much of the journey as I could. You could say he supported this show today with his very generous donation then. I mentioned water for two, which wasn't so that I would have extra water. This was to have been for my friend who planned to do the trek with me. Earlier, I had mentioned that 3 of us had planned this trip. One of my friends reluctantly bowed out about 6 months before we began, because he knew his financial obligations wouldn't allow it. My other would-be partner finished his time in the Corps 1 month before me. He bought a 30-day Greyhound pass and just traveled for a month, waiting for me to get out. We planned to meet in San Diego to begin our trip in late September. I noticed that I was putting in a bit more time and effort into preparing for the trek. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt, knowing he had a full month off before I got out, and I just figured in no time we would be adventuring across the country together. In my mind, I had imagined that this trek would be similar to the adventures of Woodrow F. Call and Augustus McCrae, of Lonesome Dove lore, only no one would lose a leg and die, and the other be tasked with carrying their corpse home. We had been friends for a couple of years, but after this voyage, we would have a friendship and a bond like that of the Lonesome Dove Texas Rangers, or maybe like Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee of the Lord of the Rings. But as it turned out, the closer we got to the trip, the more I think he started to have reservations, if this was really for him, especially after having time to ponder while riding on a Greyhound across the desert Southwest. 2 weeks before we were supposed to meet, while I was still back in Texas, having just finished leaving water and supplies across the route from San Diego to Marble Falls, he called me and broke the news. He would not be going on the trip. I was disappointed, but I was not deterred. I had put too much into preparing for this to turn back now. Ego is a powerful thing. I had told too many people of my plans. I just wished he would have told me a little sooner. I could have already been started. The Greyhound bus from Central Texas to San Diego through the desert Southwest did give me a serious reality check that I would be doing this alone. Day 3, September 22nd, 1999. Elevation, 477 feet above sea level. Sunrise, 6:36 a.m. Sunset, 6:45 p.m. Moon phase, waxing gibbous. Location, Poway, California. The morning began with a ride from my old barracks room at MCAS Miramar to the Subway restaurant 10 miles away in Poway that I had hiked to the day before. This had been one of the Subways that I had moonlighted at. I had a very good reason to stop at this Subway besides just getting a footlong. My first supply drop was waiting for me here. It was a food and snack cache. Well, the funny thing, I never really weighed my backpack. Now you can read about long-distance backpacking and become wholly inundated in a litany of necessary gear, specifications, ratings, advice, etc. Trust me, I spent months researching what every expert had to say. Plus, having 4 years of experience hiking as a Marine didn't make me a complete novice. In my research, there's a school of thought that you should make your pack and gear as light as possible. Ultralight backpacking. We're talking about cutting the handle off your toothbrush to save a part of an ounce kind of backpacking. Not a bad way to go. The idea has merit. However, sometimes ultralight backpackers will cut necessary equipment for the sake of a lighter pack. Yeah, that wasn't me. I tended to fall into a whole other school of thought. I wanted to be prepared for anything and everything, and have a few luxuries. In boot camp, there was a great deal of physical conditioning, and a great deal of material that we had to learn in a very short amount of time. We were routinely tested on how well we were learning, plus how our platoon did on the academic portion of boot camp mattered in our overall standings compared to the other platoons. So to properly motivate the studies, you were rigorously exercised if you missed any answers. Our drill instructors would tell us, if you can't be smart, you will be strong. I suppose some of that mentality stuck with me. I was determined to be strong by the time the trip was finished. All this to say, about 2 miles after the first cast drop, I was dying. People were scratching their heads, wondering why I crawled along the sidewalk like Igor from Young Frankenstein. Or is it Frankenstein? I had so much weight in my pack that I thought, how am I ever going to get to Maine, much less get out of town? It was apparent that I needed to shed some weight, and it would have to be more than the handle of my toothbrush. I spied a United States Marine recruiting office nearby. I stepped in and introduced myself. Inside, the officer in charge was Major McCadden. I explained what I was doing and asked if I could have a box and mail some items home. He gave me a box, and I cut the weight from my pack. Gone were my awesome lantern, several extra books, extra shirts, blanket and pillow, and various other sundry items. I cut everything that I thought I could live without. Major McCadden wouldn't allow me to pay him for the shipping. I was very appreciative and continued on my way with a little bit more spring in my step. My final gear list included the following: a large internal frame backpack crafted by MEI, a Coleman 2-occupant tent with a purple rainfly, one sleeping bag with fleece liner and very thin sleeping mat, a full-size poncho and rain gear, one brown fedora hat, 100 foot of parachute cord, e-tool folding shovel, extra tarp hatchet and buck knife, matches, maps for travel, flashlight, flare gun, candles, compass, 16-inch leather boots, Gerber tool, walking shoes and stick, a laptop that computes, car chamois looking camp towel, first aid kit with moleskin, Sierra backpack wood cook stove, cookware bowl and cup tin, camelback hog with 2 bladders, 8 water bottles thus, nearly 3 gallons of water, pure water filter plus, iodine water treatment pills, 6 days of food and snacks, 1 clip-on pack thermometer, coat when winter attacks, laundry bag, shower shoes, sandals, 7 pairs underwear, 9 pairs socks and 1 bandana, 1 Bible, added prayer, 1 long sleeve shirt and 4 t-shirts, 1 digital camera, 2 pairs shorts and pants, 1 dress shirt, book, green memoranda, inflatable laptop case, interchangeable book, Robinson Crusoe the First, everything else forsook. The little green memoranda book was essential. All of my trip info was in there. That, a copy of Robinson Crusoe, and my Bible were the only books I now carried. Now that my load was lighter, my outlook on life greatly improved. On my first night out of Poway, I camped by a small creek in a stand of bulrushes. It was the perfect campsite. I stayed all night and no one was the wiser. Had a small supper, traded my blisters, and read for a short spell. A nearly full moon softly illuminated my tent, where I enjoyed a well-earned night of rest. Next time on the Long Journey podcast, I reached the Pacific Crest Trail. Oh, so very exciting. Then, I could already see the headline, "Former Marine attempts hike across America. only to be air rescued off a Southern California mountain for stupidity. Less than 2 weeks into the trip. More tonight at 10 p.m. I know, really wordy. Who writes these headlines? Until next time. You can find more details about the Long Journey podcast at journeylong.com. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your platform of choice. Thank you, and may you journey long.